Cashflow Diary Podcast, episode 195.
Welcome to yet another exciting episode of the Cashflow Diary Podcast, the podcast that teaches you insider tips, tactics, and strategies for creating leverage streams of cash flow into your life. Learn from top-performing entrepreneurs, business owners, investors, and thought leaders from across the globe as they share their secrets to success. Like what you learn on this and other Cashflow Diary podcast episodes? Go to learninvestingnow.com and sign up to receive powerful tips and information that will help you succeed as an entrepreneur and investor. Now, here's your host, investor, entrepreneur, business owner, educator, speaker, author, and master facilitator of Robert Kiyosaki's cash flow game, Jay Massey.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another episode of the Cashflow Diary Podcast. My name is Jay, and you knew that already, and you also know that I'm the host. And I'm glad today that you are here because many times you've heard me say things like, you will never out-earn your personal growth. Well, there's a reason for that. And more importantly than that, sometimes the most important thing you can begin to work on is yourself, period, bar none. And today's guest is an expert at helping you do that. In fact, he himself has built multiple multi-millions, that's a lot of zeros, and more than once, companies. You got to understand that. If you do something and you do it once, that's one thing. If you do it twice, that's okay. Maybe you know what you're doing. But if you can do it in multiple industries and span many different countries and with your business experience and help, get this in your head, 10,000 trainers. He's on a goal to help 10,000 trainers train all the information that he knows in his head and has the ability to help you and I do that very thing. Business leader, author, trainer, humanitarian. He has even been able to help Make-A-Wish raise millions of dollars for more children. Here's the thing. When you have attained the goals that you have, I believe those goals become a responsibility, and this gentleman has managed to give back a significant amount, and today he's giving to you. I'm speaking, of course, of David T.S. Woods, and here's the key thing. You'll be able to get a whole lot more of him because he's got a podcast. Amplified Life is his thing, and I love it when people want to live absolutely on the edge, become the best of themselves. And now, let's get the best from Mr. David T.S. Wood. David, you there?
Jay, what an introduction. I think that's my favorite one ever. Hey, by the way, great job on what you do. I mean, I really love your style. I love how you bring your information to your public, and I just want to commend you for doing an incredible job.
Thank you. It is a labor of love, and as you well know. So I appreciate that. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask you the same question I tend to ask guests, the very first one all the time. And to give you a little bit of background, I tend to look at today's entrepreneurs a lot like yesterday's superheroes. Okay. So I think they have a lot in common. You know, superheroes, they get dressed up. Entrepreneurs get dressed up. Occasionally superheroes put on tights and masks, and entrepreneurs think they're wearing capes when we're going around doing things.
Did he say wearing tights? I've done that a few times.
Yeah, well, see, there you go. There it is. So all I'm saying, though, is we use our special talents and skills to help other people with whatever their challenges are. That's what we do. But just like that superhero, the superhero at one time, you know, before they got bit by the spider or hit by radioactive whatever, they just were typically normal people living a normal life. So they had an origin story. So before you were impacting hundreds of thousands of people, before this mission for this 10,000 trainers, before the podcast, before all the businesses, before working in over 50 countries, what I would love to know is who is David T.S. Wood?
Well, you know, it starts born in England, and you know, I lived. My dad was in the army, so we traveled a lot. So lots of different schools, and I was really, really bad at school. My history teacher sat me down when I was 15, and he looked me square in the eyes. His name was Mr. Osler, and he said, "David, you're the worst student I've had in 37 years of teaching, and you'll probably end up in jail or on the streets. And I left school that day. I was quite angry. I was quite enlightened. Wow. And I told him to go somewhere very, very far away.
Yeah. Was it warm where you were telling him to go?
Yeah, it was warm. Warm and fiery.
No doubt.
And I left school that day, and I left home around the same time. So I left home at 15. And I started dabbling in business. My first business was a window cleaning business. And I actually swept chimneys. I know it sounds kind of like an Oliver Twist story, but...
I was thinking Mary Poppins, but okay, yeah.
Chimney,
exactly.
chim.
Yes, it's my favorite movie ever. It's awesome. Anyway.
There you go. But, something happened when I was 20 that kind of changed the course of my life, and it was an accident. Because at that time, everyone I knew was getting high. Everyone I knew was getting drunk. I mean, we have a pub culture in England. I played on a darts team, and 12 of my mates were going to go on an all-inclusive trip to Tunisia. I had no idea where Tunisia was. I just knew it was all-inclusive, which meant we'd be having a lot of drinks and a lot of laughs. And when they left, I decided to stay and travel until my money ran out. I had about $2,000 left in my money belt stuffed down the front of my pants because I was so terrified of everything. And it was almost like when they took off on the plane, I turned around for the very first time in my life and noticed the world. I noticed people, and I was terrified of them because I'm in a Muslim country. For those of you that don't know, Tunisia is in North Africa, and it's a Muslim country. Here I am, I'm 54, so this is when I'm 20, 34 years ago. I'm wearing those like tight, a muscle shirt and really tight little shorts, which was very much the fashion back then. Where in a Muslim country where showing your arms and legs is just not the thing. And what ended up happening was, I locked myself in a hotel room for 7 days, and I used half my money. I was terrified to go out. But I realized in the end I had to go out. And I started a journey which lasted 10 and a half years, 42 countries. And I traveled around the world, and I worked illegally almost everywhere I worked, and ended up in Canada where I live now. And I was illegal here for 3 years. I slept on a roof the first night, and I arrived in Canada with a backpack, a guitar, and about $200. And that was in 1990. And since then, the sort of the business journey has started.
Wow. Okay. Did you say slept on a roof? I just want to make sure I heard that correctly.
Yeah. Well, I did that. When I went every time I went into a new city or a new town or a new country, I would give myself, I couldn't spend any money until I had somewhere to live and I had a job. And so the first night, typically in every single new country especially, I would sleep on a roof. And the reason I slept on roofs is there's no people on roofs. So I found it to be the safest place to sleep in a new city. And then the next day I would go out and knock on doors, and I'd figure out where I'm going to live. And obviously it got easier over time. But it was an incredible 10 and a half years. I can't tell you. I spanned the globe, and I ended up in some incredible stories and situations. And it was a wonderful time.
You do realize there's a book there, right?
Yeah, I know. People keep telling me that. Especially all my friends that are authors. They keep saying they want to kick me in the butt. Come on, Dave, write.
I'm like, yeah, there's a serious book there. Sleeping on a Roof. That's a great. Just start with that title. Now, one of the things that I would like to point out, something that you said that I think is cool, that I don't know if it was good, I don't know if it's bad. I just know it was somewhat of a courtesy. Oftentimes we can deceive ourselves into thinking. Like I know for myself, many people that I've run into went on to college, went on to, post grad and many other types of further education, only to find out that they really weren't doing it for them, or probably should have never been there in the first place. I to some degree, I wonder, do you think your teacher now did you a favor by telling you that you were a horrible student?
Yeah, but the thing is, I was a horrible student, and the truth is, I did end up on the streets at times, and I did end up in jail a couple of times, right? So, I was going down a bad road, because at that point, like I said, most of the people I knew were getting high and they were getting drunk, and that's the only world I knew, and there's a great philosophy that you become the sum of the 5 people you spend the most time with, and as far as I was concerned back then, that was the whole world. The world that existed around me was the only one I knew. And I was being influenced by that world. And when I said the accidental change, when I left that environment, what I didn't realize was that accidentally, I started hanging around people who were interested in the world, people who were interested in culture, people who were interested in languages, and because they were travelers. And those travelers had lives, and those lives had, sometimes were incredibly inspirational, or were like me, they were a little bit lost, kind of finding their way. And so accidentally, I left an environment that was toxic, and I found myself in an environment in the end that was incredibly empowering. And that often is for a lot of entrepreneurs. You know, you got to look around you and say, you know, one of the first changes I always like to say with people is, you know, environment is stronger than willpower. And so, you know, if we do a little summary right now of the people you spend the most time with. And a good indicator is this: if you're around people and when they leave you, you know, you're in a conversation with you, hang out with them, you feel smaller than, you feel less than, you feel, you feel like, your life isn't, you don't see your own greatness when you're around people, then sometimes they're the wrong people. And it's one of the hardest things to do is divorce yourself from friends and get new friends. But sometimes it's the first thing you need to do is to clean house and start hanging around with people that want things that you want.
Indeed. Just an interesting question, though. Now, I'm assuming you speak at least one other language?
A couple, yeah.
I was going to say all this traveling. It'd be interesting. Now, you bring up the concept of spending time with, the five most individuals and being influenced. We talk about the concept of eustress a lot here, and I like that differentiator in a sense, and thinking about the positive sides of peer pressure and hanging around the right types of individuals. With that being the case, I guess what was the transformational moment? Because see, there's a moment in every superhero's journey where they realize, oh, I have a skill. Oh, I have a gift, and I've got to go share it with people. What was that for you?
Well, it's actually going to sound really negative in the beginning, but it turned out to be, again, like most negative things that occur, whether it's months or years later, you look back and say, I'm so glad that happened. But I was asked to emcee a wedding, and it was in a small town. All my friends were there. I'd never been on stage. I wasn't a stage guy or anything. I was an entrepreneur. I was growing businesses. And I emceed this wedding, and I completely messed it up. I'm talking about to the point where the groom's side of the family, and remember, most of my friends were in that room because it was for my best friend's sister. So a lot of we had the same friends. The groom side of the family got up and walked out of the wedding. They didn't come to the party, and some of them didn't speak to him for a year. So, I mean, I'm talking about a complete...
Wow.
I mean, and I went into this tailspin of complete public humiliation. And for years later, my wife would catch me sort of staring off into space, and she'd say, David, stop thinking about it. And it was like I almost got stopped in time. And then, and it affected every part of me, and what ended up happening was, a few years later, my marriage was on the rocks. I was not in a great place. My business was doing okay. I mean, I was kind of stuck. And my wife suggested we go to a personal development program. And I just said yes. I say yes. My favorite word, by the way, is yes. And my second favorite is both. Right? So we drove up into the mountains to a sort of an elite sort of transformational personal development program with a guy called Harv Eker, who wrote the book Secrets of the Millionaire Mind. And I'm watching this guy on stage, and halfway through the second day, I said to my wife, I'm going to teach this program. She looked at me and she said, I know. And I went about becoming a trainer, and I've dedicated the rest of my life to that moment because I watched a guy that had a system. That's why you see 10,000 trainers, because, I was in so much pain from that incident. I mean, there's nothing like total public humiliation to put you into sometimes into a dark spot. And now, my next event's got 15,000 people in it, right? And so, and I spend my time traveling around the world, writing and delivering training programs, but fully experiential, where the audience is a star. And at the wedding, I try to be the star. I try to make it all about me. I had no understanding of the possibility of empowering an audience. So it was really, that was a transitional moment for me when I sat in that room and decided. They say the two most important days of your life is the day you're born and the day you discover why. And I discovered why that day, and I've dedicated my life to it since.
And that's awesome. It's always something like that. It has to be, I find that those moments, so we call them those superhero moments. They often start with a tragedy, but they definitely mark us in some unique way that ends up explaining why are they so passionate about what they're doing now and going off into the stratosphere. So this is kind of a setup question to some degree, but I'm curious to hear your thoughts. One of the most important skill sets that I've learned as an entrepreneur that is absolutely bar none necessary is what some people I think today overlook, especially in the days of, Twitter and Facebook, etc. But just being able to communicate is a necessary skill set for an entrepreneur. I would love to hear how important you believe it is, given all the experience that you've had, and especially if you could go back and redo that wedding.
Well, I have. I've emceed now. I mean, I've just been asked to MC another wedding, but I probably MC 1 or 2 weddings a year. In fact, Mike Dooley, do you know Mike Dooley? He's a tut.com. He's a best-selling author. He was on the movie The Secret. Have you ever heard of him?
No.
All right. Well, he wrote a book called Infinite Possibilities. He's written 11 books, so he's a prolific author. But I actually wrote his wedding, and I not only emceed his wedding, but I married him. So I've actually come a long way.
Wow.
And I just wanted to say that not because it's Mike, but because a lot of people may know him. And so, I would say that the art of communication in all forms. I mean, physiology is an art of communication. The willingness. I always say, everyone. This is one of my quotes, but everyone's waiting for somebody else to go first. So communication is a nonverbal thing first. It's a willingness to reach out. It's a willingness to touch people. I mean, I use a lot of physical touch, especially with strangers, because imagine 10 and a half years in 40 countries. And I didn't speak the language of many of those countries when I went in there. Right. And so I had to rely very, very heavily on a physiology and an openness in my smile, in my eyes, in a connection that was deeper and richer and more authentic and deeply caring. I mean, there's a lot of attributes to communication. But I think if you go through the multiple layers of communication, then you say, well, okay, and at some point you got to speak. And I think that, again, it's not a question of being articulate or using the right words. It's about where's the origin of the words and how connected am I to my words. So if I deeply am connected to my words, when I speak them, they're gonna have a resonance. There's gonna have an impact on people around me because I truly believe in what I'm saying. And that's why some people, they can talk what sounds like absolute nonsense, yet they're so deeply impassioned by and they believe so deeply in what they're saying that people are kind of in awe. And they're like, I don't know what you just said, but I'm in, right? You hear that a lot with entrepreneurs. People are like,
I think you just described nearly every politician as well, but keep going by all means.
Well, yeah, but some of those are not completely authentic, right?
Right.
But this authenticity piece, I think, is big. But then if you start to master skills, if you say, well, guess what? I am going to master certain skills. So in other words, I'm going to take my communication to another level. So what can I do? Well, I can learn how to be powerful in front of a room. And if you look at some of the great world changes, and they had different styles. Mahatma Gandhi had a completely different style from Martin Luther King, which had a completely different style from Kennedy. But each one of them have a resonance with their connection to their words, but their ability to deliver and communicate in front of it. Because, great entrepreneurs want to communicate to hundreds, if not thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of people. And people who are okay doing, the mom and pop thing, you're still going to have to communicate to, 20 or 50 or hopefully 100 people a day. But at least there's going to be that need to have those verbal skills as well. But mostly people forget. Our words are only 7% of our effectiveness in our communication. And our physiology actually makes up the greater part, and then tonality and all those things can be learned. So I'd say for an entrepreneur, think of yourself as an asset. You're the greatest asset. And think of the greatest investment is you. And I would say start doing things like improv. Go to acting classes, go to communication classes, go to personal development classes. And like I say, your wealth can only grow to the extent you grow yourself. And I think it's fun because you're going to start really finding that, even your physiology, how to move your body, it can be a learned skill.
It's interesting and refreshing, by the way, to hear you say these things, especially some of the what some might consider to be off the wall or outside of the box. Why do I don't want to be an actor. Why do I need to go to improv? I'm often educating and telling people that, you probably should go to Toastmasters and take advantage of the table topic section, because life is a table topic. I mean, you don't have time to prepare all the time for the answers, but you want to be able to say something and sound somewhat intelligent, even if all you can say is, you know what, I really know nothing about that. All of those things are necessary skill sets. But I like the thing the most is all about you have to grow yourself. Here's the question. Why is it when the young entrepreneur, when we're first getting started, the last thing it seems like we actually want to do is to invest in that time or that money or that seminar or that personal development piece, but we really, tell me, I get this a lot, especially in the real estate world. Tell me more about how to write this kind of offer, and tell me more about how to do this, high level technique over here. But the basics of personal development seem to be overlooked.
Well, I think there's another part to it as well, which I think we can throw in the mix. And I know that we could probably talk all day on this one, and hopefully we can. but the idea that, people always say to me, well, how do I reach more people? How do I have a deeper connection? Because really, when people feel seen and heard and loved and respected and liked, all those different things, there's a connection. And I would say common ground. The thing that really, really differentiates, and if you're at home right now and you have a pen and paper, if you're driving, don't do this, do it in your mind maybe. But, imagine if you draw two circles and they overlap in the middle by a small piece. So you've got two circles overlapping slightly in the middle. And the person on the left is one circle. And let's say they love ballet and they love cooking and they love the opera and they love walking, right? And the person on the right, all right, they love space, and they love, deep sea diving, and they love deep sea fishing, and they love hunting. You can see that these two people are polar opposites. They have very, very different interests. But let's say in the middle, in the intersection of the middle, they both love dogs, right? And so immediately there's a place of common ground. And what I found, and I've trained almost 1 million people personally. And what I found is when I do this exercise where I'll ask people to just turn to each other and find what they have in common, that it only takes a matter of seconds before they can find something they have in common. And I'll challenge them. I'll say 5 things you have in common. Go. And I'll only give them 90 seconds. And as soon as they find common ground, the energy in the room will ignite. The connection between people, they'll say things to me. They'll say, I feel connected. I feel safe. I feel alive. I feel like I really like this person. And yet they've only been speaking for 90 seconds, 2 strangers speaking. And in 90 seconds, if you can find a place of common ground. So one of the most important parts of finding common ground with more people is leading an extraordinary life. So taking up more hobbies, doing more things, learning new things, always being like, if you're not learning something new right now, go learn something, whether it's dancing or whether it's guitar or something. Because next time you speak to someone, if they say, actually, I'm just playing guitar, and you say, me too, suddenly you have common ground. Suddenly there's an electricity that's going to go between you. And that is one of the most definitive secrets of great communicators, is finding common ground. And that's why the more experiences you have, the more things you say yes to, it's going to come back, and you're going to have a touch. And people are great orators. People will feel connected to them because of their life story.
Yeah. You know what's funny is that I often don't think a lot about how I grew up in terms of the military. So while you were sleeping on roofs somewhat voluntarily, we were being dragged around because of the Army, so again, all these places. But what it did give me is a significant amount of experience with a lot of different people in a very condensed amount of time. And when you mention the idea of having all of those extra experiences, that's true. And picking up an extra hobby or two probably couldn't hurt either.
Right. Well, that just makes life fun, right? Because, when we're learning, we're growing. When we're growing, there's something exciting about learning something new. Everyone, it's always messy. This is the bit that most people forget. Every master was once a disaster in everything they ever did. So even real estate, you and I, I know we should probably talk about money at some point, but, I remember my first deal, it was a complete disaster, right? And I was really bad at it. And I made lots of poor choices and lots of bad mistakes. And then I did another deal. And then, I got better and better. And over time, our portfolio completely changed because we stayed in the game. And what most people do, they have a disaster, whether it's in business or in investing, and then they stop. And they don't realize that the disaster parts are part of the game, because you're not going to typically, sometimes you do, but typically you're not going to hit a home run on the first bat, right? You're going to have to miss the ball. You're going to have to hit some balls over your head. You're going to have to break a bat or two before you start to understand how to swing that bat. And it's funny, I'm using baseball as an analogy, and I don't play baseball, but there you go.
It doesn't matter, but it fits. It's so true. I mean, learning how to get, let's go with baseball. Learning how to get on base is a skill set. If nothing else, just get on base. And the first time at bat, it's not going to be like it was. And even if it does go well, I promise you, 2,000 swings later, you'll look back at that first swing and you'll be like, oh my God, I can't even believe I hit the ball. I got so lucky. I mean, there's just so much. You're going to spend like 300 swings without hitting a ball.
Yeah. And I think that's the life of the entrepreneur. Great entrepreneurs, they have made more mistakes. They've had more flunks. They've tripped over. They've fallen down more and successful. I think all my wealthy friends, and I'm fortunate to have people in my life who are worth billions, and I have friends in my life that are broke. So I equally love them. It's not like I don't judge, but I mean some people have jobs and they're limited incomes, and it means that they live a life where they're typically, just managing or struggling or just surviving, right? Because their income is so small. But I have friends who are billionaires, and when you look at the differences, it's about their willingness to take a step, and the difference between my billionaire friends, and I have 3 friends that are billionaires, and if you look at their life and you listen to their story, they're very normal, very average kind of people, but they kept taking those steps, and they took the steps early, and they learned from those steps. And when you listen to the things that went wrong in their life, instead of being stopped or reduced by them, they became empowered by them, and they said, you know what, I'm going to go back into the arena. I'm going to do this again and again and again. And they've refined themselves over time to the point where they've mastered something. But they were all of them were disasters in the beginning, right?
Well, and in fact, one of the things that you're saying that I absolutely love is I'm often asking people to fail fast, fail forward, and fail frequently. And you're really nailing the concept of failing forward. You don't, experience that failure event and then go, hey, you know what? I tried swimming. I'm just going to go do jogging now. You pick right back up right where you are. And that takes courage. That takes guts. That takes a lot of things. So I guess, if you were that entrepreneur right now, you're going about learning to become, more than what you currently are. Because I'm sure I get the question a lot, Jay, can I do this? And I often tell people, no, you can't. The version of you that is standing in front of me is not capable. You must become more than the one that's standing in front of me right now in order to get to become the person that you could actually execute on this dream. What would you say are some of the major areas of growth most entrepreneurs need to focus on or be aware of that they may not be aware of?
Okay, so you probably picked up on this at least once before in one of the many other episodes, but personal growth is a part of the name of the game. You must do some of it. You don't have the option to not grow personally and make your business work. So one of the best ways to do that, and yes, I'm about to remind you to pick up a copy of Cashflow Diary, 10 Steps to Creating Wealth in Any Economy. You can get a copy for free at cashflowdiary.com/free book. Again, that's cashflowdiary.com/free book. For those of you listening on a mobile device right now, send a text message to 72,000. 72,000. The keyword is book. 72,000. The keyword is book. One of the biggest and best things that has happened for me personally, and I know for you, is being able to read and understand the insights of others, to be able to grow personally, apply that information as it fits for me, and move forward. We all must be in this state of constant, never-ending improvement, and we've got to find ways to do it. If not my book, then go pick up another book. I don't care what book. Just go pick up something, begin to read it, and most importantly, learn to move at the speed of instruction. Enough of me. Let's get back to David and see what he has to say on this subject.
Well, I think a lot of entrepreneurs I see are are very rigid and they get stuck in boxes. And so what happens is they feel like, I want to be an entrepreneur. And you look at the stats, I think it's about 74% of people that are employed currently, they want to be an entrepreneur. Right. But, what happens is if you look at the business stats, it's up to 93% of people in business fail. And 93, it's actually about 84%. But what they're saying is if they look up to 93%, that difference between 84 and 93%, that comes from people who are in business that have been in business for a dozen years and still not making money. In other words, they are completely chained to their business and they struggle every month. So they consider that to be a failure as well. It's people that don't, create wealth from their business or freedom. Let's say freedom is the thing, because a lot of people maybe are listening and you're not looking to have wealth, because wealth is such an ambiguous thing to, some my wealth and someone else's wealth is completely different. But I think freedom to choose, freedom of time, freedom to be able to say yes to go. If I said to you right now, listen, Jay, let's take a month off and go and climb Kilimanjaro, which we recently just did. But a lot of people can't. A, it's about a $10,000 trip, and B, you need a month off. In fact, we took 6 weeks off. Can you do both those things? Well, most entrepreneurs can't do that because they don't start off with a life by design concept. And I think that one thing I'd be saying, if you're brand new, first of all, think about your life and say, well, if I could design anything I want, what do you want? And if you say, well, what I really want to do is I want to have a cultural experience. I want to be able to travel for 3 months of the year. I want to, and then you go buy a Subway franchise, right? and you're stuck behind a counter. Because it's safe. You think, well, I want to be an entrepreneur, so I go and buy a franchise. So, you just bought a job. And it's a limited job. And I'm not saying that isn't the way to go, but if your passion's in life, and if you say, well, if I was designing my life, I want to design that I have at least 8 weeks off every year. And I want to be able to have the money to be able to travel where I want. And I want to be able to do these certain things. Well, if that's where I'd start with a life by design concept. Then I would find a business, or I would find something that would allow that to happen. And how do we know what that looks like? Well, I'd find other entrepreneurs that are doing things, that are living the life that I want, the freedom that I want, and I would start to model them, because the quickest way to learn is to model success. And there's a great saying, success leaves clues, right? So if there's someone who's leading the life that I want, and they're in business in a certain way, and they're behaving a certain way, and I can model those attributes, I can then start to design a life in day one, so that I don't become one of these stats of someone whose business is failing because they're obviously not impassioned, or they've chosen a sector it's the wrong sector, but B, they're trapped because now they just bought a job and they're actually unhappy, but they don't know how to get out of it. Now they're trapped because they've made an investment, they've invested all this time, and most people just get trapped there and they feel unfulfilled and unsatisfied. I'm not sure if I answered your question correctly, but that's where I'd start.
Well, I think you hit it head on the nail. You know what I'm trying to say.
Nail on the head. That one. Yeah.
That one. But for those of you who are thinking in the real estate world, this is what I've meant when I say I'm a lifestyle investor, and I don't necessarily mean fancy watches and cars and those types of things, because I've already learned that I don't fit in a Lamborghini, and I'm still upset about it. But
are you 6'7" or something?
Yeah, right. Yeah, I'm 6'4", and I can't fit it behind the wheel. I can barely fit in the passenger side. I was not encouraged in any way. It did not go well. So moving on. But this is also why the real estate business. So for your real estate business, do this by design. What does that mean? That means, if you're going to do the single family house thing, don't do a single family house. Or if you do, be prepared to have property management in place so that you can still maintain your time freedom. Have 100 houses, not just one. If you're going to do the Subway franchise thing, here's how you do the Subway franchise thing and still manage to do lifestyle. You have 15 franchises, not one. That way you have the ability to put in between you and that counter a number of people who can watch and oversee and do those other things. It's a matter of scale. Most of what you're wanting to do can be done. It's just there's so much more that's required from a team standpoint and scalability standpoint in order to make all these things happen. No more playing the small game at all. No more playing the small game. So I'm curious to know, David, what would you say if you had to, I should say, start from zero today,
I love that. I love that question.
One, what resources do you think you need to get going? And two, how long would it take you? What would you do?
Well, I've reinvented myself quite often. I mean, I consider myself to be a little bit of a reinvention expert because I don't have any fear, right? I mean, because I've learned how to trust me. And I think, having self-trust is a big thing. So the number one resource I feel is people. Because,
yes.
right?
Sorry, you just got me all kind of excited
Did you get goosebumps then, Jay?
Right. It was like, yeah.
Right? Yeah, because people always think it's money, but it's not. It's people. Because if people know, like, and trust you, they'll invest in you. And if you've got experience and you're integrous, because integrity is a really important thing. One of the hardest lessons I had to learn was how to tell the truth. And I always say it took me 44 years to learn how to tell the truth. And another one of my quotes is, my 8 most favorite words: tell the truth all the time with compassion. Which means you've got to tell the hard truths and you've got to be able to tell the truth. Which means, if I lost everything and I'm a resilient, I don't lose myself. I just lose what I had. I lose my home. I lose my car. I lose whatever it is, right? All those things are gone. Everything still remains. The only thing different is I don't have that particular property in my life anymore, or that car, or whatever. And most of us tie our success to the wrong thing. And I look at the friends I have. I look at the connections I have. And I would go and I would look at what is it I want to do next, and I would do it immediately. I'm talking about, and this is what I've done in the past, where I've changed my life and I've gone from one thing to the next. I do it the very next day, and sometimes the day of a disaster. And again, I've never gone bankrupt, but I never judge people who do, ever. I always say Walt Disney went bankrupt 7 times, and I've had friends who've dealt with bankruptcy. I mean, Donald Trump's been bankrupt 4 times, I think now. But the idea, though, is that the resource we really have is people, and people who believe in us and believe in what we want to create is go and partner with someone who has the money, who has the an equal, and light them up and allow them, and then allow them to see something that you want to create. And I always find that that's the easiest thing, Jay, is to sometimes, it's like having a fire. I mean, people who've lost everything in a fire. A friend of mine, Rick, he lost his home, and it was in a wildfire, a forest fire, and it spread, and it took about 230 homes out from our city. And I remember I was there with him the day he found out his home was completely gone. And I looked at him and I said, Rick, I'm going to make a prediction that one day you're going to phone me and say, Dave, that was the best thing that ever happened in my life. And I saw him about a year later. You know what he said to me? He said, Dave, that was the best thing that ever happened in my life. Because he said, guess what? We got to redesign our new house. We put a pool in it, and the insurance was really awesome. He says, all the clothes I never wore were gone. All the crap. Yeah, I lost some photographs. But today, in today's world, no one loses photographs because they're all in some cloud somewhere, right? So in the end, and this is a big thing for entrepreneurs, always have the right insurance. I can't stress enough that insurance is something you don't want to be skimping on. Even when you rent a car, put in the extra $1 million. Because if you hit someone, it's just easier to have more insurance than less. And I know it's a pain in the ass, but I'd still do that. And so what I say is that, sometimes you lose everything. You get a brand new start. And it's almost like, yes, I can do whatever I want now. All that old crap's gone. I've got all the experience still remains. I have more experience than I had. I learned things that I didn't know when I started my last endeavor. And now I'm a brand new person with a brand new start. So I think it's actually a great thing to think about. Yeah.
And it becomes this, it's like, all the weight that you were, if you were swimming and you were swimming with weights on, all of a sudden the weights are gone, and hey, you weren't going to clean the garage anyway, so hey, at least it's gone. You don't have to worry about it. I kind of like all of those things.
That is a good way. That is a good way to clean the garage, is to set fire to it.
Yeah, it's done. It's I know where everything is.
Imagine tomorrow we're going to get a phone call and say, "Well, Jay told me I should set fire to my house."
Dude. Right? I feel like we're going to have to have a disclaimer at the beginning and end of this particular episode. Yeah. It's all good. So when it comes to the idea of creating businesses, share with us some of the ones that you've done and what led to making those possible.
Well, again, like I said to you, when I started out, I was a window cleaner, and that's a really important start, because I've said, when I see people like right now who are struggling, and I always say, why don't you just grab a ladder and a bucket and start there, and then build Because I would. I mean, if I lost everything and I needed to make money, I mean, I don't see that happening, that I ever have this I need to make money mindset anymore. But let's say I did, I would have no problem picking up a ladder and a bucket and going back to my roots. But I'd build a really, really big window cleaning round that offered such amazing service that became significant that I'd find a manager to run it and I'd have a residual income from it. And I would guarantee that would happen within about 6 months because I would not be denied. And the difference between a great entrepreneur and one that is mediocre is the level of passion and the level of drive that they're going to put in the beginning. It's like, a rocket ship. All of the energy is used in the beginning. So when I start something, I go so hard and so fast. And it's like, you're not sleeping much. But I also have an end game. I'm thinking, well, how soon before I can hand over this thing I'm building to somebody else so I can then claim my freedom again? So I don't go into it, I'm going to go clean windows. I'm thinking, all right, I'm going to build the best freaking window cleaning company that this city's ever seen. And then we'll take over the next city. And then it's going to be the province, right? That's a different mindset from most people. So I started window cleaning, and it taught me how to knock on doors, and it taught me about building relationships, and it taught me about freedom because I'd been working at the time. I remember I left school at 15, and I was earning 40 pence, that's 80 cents an hour. And I mean, it sounds like Dickens' wages, but I mean, I was like grossly underpaid. And I remember when I first built a window cleaning round. I was like cleaning council estate windows, which is like rows and rows and rows of the same houses. And I'm out there and I'm cleaning these windows. And by the way, this sounds like a window cleaning story. I think this is an entrepreneur story. I think this is a philosophy story. This is I can apply the same principles to any business and I'm going to have the same success, right? I start off there because I don't know how to window clean. I just borrowed a ladder from next door and I was kind of broke, and here I am. And I owned a motorcycle, by the way. So I'd take my ladders, half of them up the village, and then I'd come back for the other half and I'd be riding a motorcycle with a freaking 12-foot ladder on my shoulder, right? And what I do, I started doing this kind of like small scale. But I was still suddenly I was making 4 or 5 times more because I was in control. I could work as hard as I wanted to. And then as I started to see it a little bit more clearly, I started to say, well, why don't I do the pub? Why don't I do, the big manor house on the hill? And before long, I started to design a window cleaning route that had the biggest houses where I made the most money. And I would often be given a cup of tea and I'd climb onto the roof and I'd sit there in the English countryside. Remember, I was imprisoned at, 80 cents an hour. And here I am sitting there with my legs crossed, eating a chocolate biscuit on top of a manor house. And a manor house, and I'd make 250 pounds, which is, I couldn't make that in a month, and I'd make it in a day, and I'd spend the day there, and I'd have a laugh with these very, very rich people, and I'd ask them questions about their life, and I'd look through their windows at the journeys, and maybe that's what inspired me to travel, right? And I'd say that, and before long, I started to design the route around how I wanted to feel, and then I found someone to manage the route, and so that started to pay me, and I could go and do something else, and that was an early lesson that I still apply today.
No doubt. And I can hear it. And I hope for those of you that are listening, you also heard he didn't let what he didn't have stop him. I mean, including knowing how to clean the window. he did. I've tried to imagine carrying a ladder on a motorcycle, but
Well, my first car, because I had a motorcycle license in England, in fact, on my Instagram account, which is Amplified Living, right, there's a picture of my first car, which is a 3-wheeled car. It's called a Robin Reliant. And so my first real car, I could drive on a motorcycle license, but as long as I didn't use reverse. So if I wanted to reverse out of a parking stall, apparently I had to push it. Of course, I always used reverse, but it had a reverse on it, but under the statutes. So Actually, I ran my business. After a while, I bought this little 3-wheel car, man, and I had more freedom. My girlfriend at the time worked for a big corporation. She was an executive assistant for the GM of this large company, and I saw how big his car was and how fancy his watch was, but he had no freedom. And I'd be sitting on the roof eating chocolate biscuits in the middle of the afternoon, laughing with people. Right. And I thought, I got life made here.
Right. So if you value freedom, listen to what being said. So tell us a little bit more. What are you doing today? Where are you today? Are you better with your geography now?
Yeah. I mean, I live a life by design. I live in the most gorgeous place in Canada. I mean, in fact, after the show, I'll show you. I'm overlooking a lake that's 80 miles long. It's breathtaking. And the philosophy of a life by design means that I create. Every day should be an experience. So again, as an entrepreneur, if we start off with the philosophy of life by design, it means we have to work really, really hard, but never lose sight of the fact of what we're building, and that's where leverage comes in. So I've built every kind of company. I had a natural products distribution company where we were the first persons to put in handmade, handcrafted displays into like health food stores, and we were in every single health food store in Canada, and we were bought out by a Swiss company. I've owned a restaurant and a pub. We had a huge restaurant and pub. I mean, I could go through a litany of different experiences, but the one that changed my life and allowed me to think differently. And this is, I don't know if you've ever read the book, The E-Myth by Gerber. Have you ever read that? Yeah. What I love about The E-Myth, which is the entrepreneurial myth, they talk about the lady that, loves making pies. And she's brilliant at it. And everyone says, oh, you should open a pie shop. And so she does. And then once she opened a pie shop, suddenly she has to get an employee, and then she suddenly has to do advertising, and she has to do all these different things. And they say the number one reason why people fail in business is because of a lack of skills. And the things that we're passionate about, she's passionate about making pies, was her skill set. But running a business and being an entrepreneur was not. And so, a lot of people fail there because the dream is around the pie making, but the actual reality is about running a business and the pitfalls of that. And then, not getting paid and paying everyone else first. And there's a litany of things that will come with that. So with me, I got into network marketing, and it was kind of accidental. And I just arrived in Canada. In fact, I was still illegal at some point. I was just about to get my papers to stay in Canada. And, someone offered me this video, and I watched it, and I watched it, and I watched it, and I watched it. I thought, really? You can create freedom? Is that really what you can do? And I bombed, by the way, because every master was once a disaster. And I was an awful network marketer. I was crappy at it, and I did everything wrong, and I was terrible, and fortunately I didn't quit, which most people do when they have that experience. And then I joined another company, and as part of their training, they made me read a book called Think and Grow Rich. Nice. And that book changed my life, because I thought, what? You mean I can think differently about money? I can think differently about wealth? And remember, I had never, I came from a background of window cleaning and stuff like that. But remember, I was willing to trade time. When I came to Canada, I was a waiter, and I was earning $4 an hour as a waiter back then, because we rely on tips in Canada. I remember when I got my first $10,000 a month check, and I'm looking at it thinking, no one ever told me I was worth $10,000 a month. No one. My teacher told me I'd end up in jail or on the streets. This is like amazing. And then I remember, making $100,000 a month and $200,000 a month. And, I've had $1 million day now. And I look at that and I think, well, where do those zeros come from? How do I add a zero to my, and it's this, the philosophies that we're talking about. And network marketing allowed me to understand leverage and the difference between residual income and working income, and the difference between passive, residual, and working. So what I do is I understand there's times I have to have working income, but I focus my energies on creating residual and passive income streams. So my real estate business, which we have, we own a lot of strip malls. We own mobile home parks. We own mini storages, stuff like that. We have a lot of diversity in our real estate portfolio, apartment buildings, and so the real estate business. I have a partner, and he takes 6% off the top to manage everything, and then we have managers like companies that manage our properties. But he oversees the entire real estate portfolio, which means it's completely passive for me. The only thing I do is I get involved in the investing. I love the negotiations. I like the buying part. He runs it.
Yeah.
So I now understand the difference, Jay, between passive income, residual income, which is the network marketing piece, is I think everyone on the planet should understand what network marketing is, and that when we can really leverage, because we don't need the same skill set, because the company looks after most, you've got to find the right company, by the way.
Right.
The company looks after all the skills, but what's left is the human connection, and then this idea of complete leverage. And so, I mean, I think if everyone understood that they're having a business where they can really create a network, and that it can be a global network, and the freedom. I've helped more people create wealth, more people become millionaires, more people create freedom in their life through the network marketing profession. And I still do business consulting, conventional business consulting, but I can't create the same freedom as fast. But people have to treat it like a business, and they have to go into it, and they have to understand in the beginning they're going to be crappy. And when they learn how to master network marketing, they can become unbelievably free. And that's what I love about it. So I love conventional business, I love network marketing, and I love investing. So I'm a rare breed.
Well, at the end of the day, we all have those roots that help us. I mean, I know for myself, the network marketing and participating in a number of different companies is part of where I learned so many things when it comes to business and understanding it. But those business skills are something that, I mean, you're hitting on something that is a pet peeve of mine, because a number of real estate people want to do real estate. But I'm like, real estate is still a business. And for whatever reason, we forget that, and we don't learn the marketing, the accounting, the other stuff that you're talking about that's necessary, that's mentioned in Michael Gerber's book. It's just part of the business. I mean, yeah, you may like actually putting up the walls, but putting up the walls and painting the walls and designing the house, that's wonderful. That's your pie. Somebody's got to know that your pie exists, at some place, some point, and you can set up systems and learn all of these things to make them happen at the end of the day. So we've been talking quite a bit. I get the feeling you and I could share the stage and talk for a long, long time.
Yeah.
So with that being said, though, I'm guessing that there's more than one individual listening right now who wants to find out more of what you're up to, what Amplified Living is, all this other stuff. Tell us a little bit about that and how we can track you down.
Well, my company is Amplified Living, and under that umbrella, we have different things we do. Recently we did an Amplified Leadership event, one in Vegas and one on the Gold Coast. And we had like John Maxwell and Robin Sharma and Lisa Nichols and Jack Canfield, and we bring in some of the best minds in a particular area. And unfortunately, some of these guys are real close friends of mine. So that kind of stuff I do. I do events around the world, sometimes adventure, Amplified Island Adventure. I have a little resort down in Belize. We own a private island there, and we take people down there and we create adventures. But if someone wants to listen to my show, it's called Crank It Up. It's on iTunes. And I also have another show called Amplified Network Marketing. But that's a great way to sort of find us. And amplifiedliving.com is our website. And it's just come and play, it's just one of those things, where if you want to, or actually, Facebook is AMPD Living, Amped Living. I just say come along. And, I always say that if you find someone that suits, if you like the message, if it's the message that you resonate with, come along. And if it's not, maybe there's a resource we can help you with, because not everyone resonates with everyone, Jay. But I think your style and my style are very different, are very similar, and we have a very similar philosophy. So I think that there's a mutual. In fact, I'd like to invite you on my show. I think that our audience could learn a lot from you. So I'd like to extend that invite to you as well.
Consider it accepted. I definitely appreciate that. So let me. As we close down here, I got to ask this question. Let's pretend for a moment that there's someone listening. They're standing in front of the superhero outfit store right now. They're thinking, I want to get dressed up. I want to be this, entrepreneur. But in the back of their head, they have that voice. And you're familiar with that voice. You've since tamed it. You know how to manage and work around it and with it, etc.
And it never goes away, everyone. It never goes away.
That's what I was here to say. It doesn't. But let's pretend for a second that they're picking out their outfit for the first time. They just finally identified what their superpower is. They're ready to share it, but that voice is still going in the back of their head. What would you say to that person right now?
Well, again, depending on your particular skill set. So if your skill set, if you really already have a skill set in business and you want to step into a bigger game, I'd say really find people that you love who are doing what you're thinking of doing. Find success there. Go and dig them out. See who's the best. Let's say you want to get into real estate. Who's the best realtor? You can find it out easily. Just go and look in the paper and ask them out for dinner. Pretend to buy a house from them. Hang out with them. And I would say set an intention. It's very, very interesting. Quite often I've set intentions to get to know people and become friends with people. And that's a different thing, to become close to people. And I would say find people that are really good at what you want to do and look at what's creating their success. Before you jump in, before you put that cape on, is really just to go and figure that out. Or what's their lifestyle? If you say, I'm going to do this, and go and find someone who's doing it. And if they seem freaking unhappy and overwhelmed and overworked, you may want to reconsider which freaking cape you're going to put on, because that's like, I don't want to end up with that life, right? And a lot of people don't do that first initial thing, is what is the life I want to create? If you lack the skills, I would say network marketing is probably the most powerful force in the universe. It's created freedom for me, financial freedom in every level, but it's freedom. I mean, all the people I work with, when they first come in, they're all bad at it. And I mean, my show, Amplified Network Marketing, may be a resource to even listen to figure out why the modern network marketing industry and profession, I call it a profession, is such an option. Because then what happens is you're surrounded by people whose job, every day I wake up, I have to say, who am I going to help today succeed? My only success can come from the success of others. It's a very different philosophy, and I'm willing to teach anyone everything I know. And that's a very different thing as well, because in conventional business, if I own a business, I'm not going to tell my competitors exactly what I do. I'm going to try and keep a few cards hidden, and I want to keep some secrets. But in network marketing, there are no secrets. So I'd say it's a really and then you're surrounded by a culture of like-minded people. You remember what I said? You become the sum of the 5 people you spend the most time with. Right. And I've just had so much success, and I'm so impassioned by this profession. Again, once you find the right company, and I'm not going to tell you which company to choose, although I do feel I know the best companies, but I think it's one of those things is it's just a profession where it's surrounded by people who are impassioned. They see the world as their playground. The freedom is the number one thing to create, and they understand that it's going to be hard in the beginning. So you need to give yourself, I always say, come in with a 10-year mindset, and within 3 years we can replace an income and get you free, the first step. But then within 10 years you'll be leading a life that you never thought was possible. And I truly believe this, and I've done it, and I've helped so many people succeed at it. So this isn't like a network marketing pitch. It's nothing like that. This is a profession that creates freedom. So I'd say that is probably, for most entrepreneurs, the way to go, because conventional business is hard. And then with the money you make from your residual income, you then start creating passive income streams. You can start using that money to create your investment portfolios and your real estate empires. And that's what I do. I use residual income to fund my passive income streams. And I'm constantly saying, how do I create residual income? How do I create passive income? Those are the 2 most important questions you need to ask. And if you want to get yourself handcuffed to a job, then go buy a business, right? And before long, you're going to be stuck into it, and you'll be paying bills and doing crap that you don't want to do, and you're going to be unhappy. And most entrepreneurs are unhappy because it never gives them the freedom they're actually looking for. And then people who have jobs, they work just hard enough to keep their job, and they're paid just enough not to quit. And that's not the answer either. So what's the answer? Freedom.
I love it. I love it. I absolutely live it too. So I just want to say I appreciate you taking the time to make a significant investment here with the Cashflow Diary audience.
Thank you, Jay. And again, I love your style. It's even more fun to be on the show than listen to it.
That's good to hear. All right, ladies and gentlemen, you know what time it is? It's time for you to move at the speed of instruction. What does that mean today? Well, it means get over to amplifiedliving.com. It means listen, understand this. Network marketing, in my opinion, as well, is one of the best business schools on the planet, and the tuition is absolutely affordable for every one of you. At the end of the day, you've got to become more than what you currently are right now. And I think you've got some ideas on how to make that happen. Guys, gals, it's been fun talking to you today. I look forward to talking to you soon. Until next time.